benzodiazepines that Dr. Murray admitted to giving, and I want you to assume that Dr. Murray gave just the 25 milligrams of propofol, okay? In that setting, with the benzodiazepines and the 25 milligrams, assume there was no drip, do all your opinions that you've shared with the jury here today still apply?
Yes. Still, it's inappropriate to give propofol for sleep. You don't give it in an unmonitored setting without the appropriate equipment or backup. You still need to be prepared for an emergency. His response to the arrest was still inappropriate, and his delay for 911 was still inappropriate, and his documentation was still inappropriate.
And it would be a foreseeable risk that the patient in that setting, with the drugs administered by Dr. Murray as he states he gave, it would be a foreseeable risk that the patient could suffer respiratory depression and cardiovascular failure.
Yes, sir.
And when you take all the extreme deviations in total that you've delineated, assuming it's the 25 milligrams, it's still your opinion that Dr. Murray played a direct causal role in the death of Michael Jackson?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor. Nothing further.
Mr. Logan, thank you. Request examination, Mr. Flanagan.
Doctor, on that sleep study that
Yes, sir.
we've commented on, the net effect was that propofol helped insomnia, didn't it?
Yes.
Oftentimes, doctors on occasion will use certain drugs for off-label purposes, won't they?
Yes, sir.
And sometimes the use of those drugs on off-label purposes become the norm in later years.
Yes, sir.
Now, in your analysis of this case for the medical board, you've made certain determinations of various acts of Dr. Murray were beyond the standard of care. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, your analysis for the medical board is a lot different than the analysis in this case, isn't it?
Sustained.
In this case, you need to make an analysis as to whether or not each one of these deviations was a causative factor in the death of Michael Jackson, don't you?
Relevance.
Overruled.
I'm sorry, the question one more time.
In this case, you need to make an analysis as to whether or not these deviations were a causative factor in the death of Michael Jackson. Is that correct?
Correct. And I even in my statement, standard of care, I stated that it did directly impact his death.
Okay. Well, you've come up with a lot of deviations that you can feel that are egregious, that you've talked about in this case, that really had nothing to do with Michael Jackson's death. Isn't that correct?
Objection
No.
misstates the testimony.
Well, it didn't.
Just a moment, please. Overruled. The answer can remain.
I mean, not having a battery backup for monitoring equipment wasn't a causative factor, was it?
Again, when in this statement, I go through the standard of care. So even though the standard of care was breached, it may not directly affect his death, but I comment all the standard of care. But if you look generally on 5 of the 6 points I made, whether propofol should be given in the first place, was it given on a monitored setting, was he ready for an emergency, how he behaved during the arrest, and his delay in calling 911, those 5 things all directly linked to Mr. Jackson's death.
Dr. Murray gave propofol without problem for 40 days, didn't he?
Objection assumes facts, not in evidence.
The objection is sustained as to the form of the question.
You read his statement where he told the police that he'd been given propofol to Michael Jackson for approximately 40 days. 50 days? 40 or 50 days, correct?
Correct.
Without incident.
Correct.
Now, your analysis regarding the causation in this case, you've made certain assumptions, haven't you?
I don't understand your question.
Well, in concluding that a violation caused the death of Michael Jackson, you've made certain assumptions in this case, haven't you?
He got propofol, so you don't give propofol, so that's not an assumption. And then he was not monitored, so I didn't assume that. He wasn't prepared for an emergency. I didn't assume that. The way he described behavior on his very own words to the arrest, I didn't make that up. And his delay of calling 911 was not an assumption, it's fact. So I didn't assume anything. I have facts.
Well, you assume, for purposes of determining whether or not Dr. Murray was responsible for his death, that Dr. Murray gave the medications that were in Michael Jackson's body to him. Didn't you?
According to, it could be all from his body, yes. From Dr. Murray, yes.
You assumed that Dr. Murray gave him those medications, didn't you?
I can assume that it gave his medications, yes.
And you assume that he gave those medications in a lethal amount, don't you?
It can be assumed that he gave the lethal amount.
And as a matter of fact, you even
those are assumptions. You're right.
You've assumed that Dr. Murray gave him a drip along with the slow bolus injection.
I believe he gave a drip, but just as I answered Mr. Walgren's question, when you give even 25 milligrams of propofol, and assuming he was on a drip, he would still be directly linked because the patient needs to be monitored even after 25 milligrams of propofol.
And you have no idea what 25 milligrams of propofol would do you?
I do very little, probably.
Nothing further.
Mr. Flanagan, thank you. We redirect by the people? People's counsel are conferring.
Just one question. Dr. Steinberg, just to be abundantly clear.
Sorry.
All the facts that were relayed to you in Dr. Murray's own words, and for the sake of argument, let's assume that all transpired and Michael Jackson then self-administered either lorazepam or propofol because he was not being monitored appropriately by his doctor who was entrusted with his care. Wouldn't Dr. Murray still be a direct causal link in Michael Jackson's death?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Walgren, thank you. We recross, Mr. Flanagan? Thank you. May Dr. Steinberg be excused, Mr. Walgren?
Please, Your Honor.
Mr. Flanagan?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. Dr. Steinberg, give me a moment. I want to thank you for your testimony. Please don't discuss your testimony or the facts of the case with any other witnesses until we finish the trial. You may step down and leave. You're excused, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. At this time, the people may call their next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The people would call Dr. Nader Kamangar.
Sir, please remain standing and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly state that the testimony you may give in the cause now pending before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please be seated. Please state your name for the record. Spell your first and last names.
My name is Nader Kamangar. My first name is spelled Nader. Last name is spelled Kamangar.
Dr. Kamangar, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Let me provide you with some introductory instructions, which are instructions I give to every witness in every case. The first of which is to please sit back and relax. The second of which is to speak in a loud voice, and that way everyone in the courtroom can hear you. The third instruction is to answer yes or no to a question that calls for a yes or no, rather than using slang like or which can be very tricky. And the last instruction is to wait until you hear an entire question before you even start to volunteer an answer. In our daily lives, many of us are used to interrupting each other because we think we know what's being asked, but it's important in a courtroom to wait for that full question to be asked in its entirety before you respond. Is that all okay?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Direct examination by the people. Mr. Walgan. You may.
Good afternoon, Doctor.
Good afternoon.
Sir, what do you do for a living?
I'm a pulmonary critical care and sleep medicine physician.
All right. And how long have you been a medical doctor?
Since 1996. 15 years now.
And where are you employed?
I'm employed at Olive UCLA Medical Center.
And can you describe for us, please, your general background, your education, and your training
Sure,
that led you to where you are in your career at this day?
Sure.
You want to make yourself a little comfortable so you don't have to bend over. You can actually move a chair if you want to.
Thank you.
Sit up.
Just to give you a brief summary, I'm currently Associate Professor of Medicine at UCLA in the Division of Pulmonary and Critical Care. And I finished my latter part of my training with my fellowship in 2000 through 2003 at UCLA and at Cedars-Sinai Medical Centers in pulmonary critical care and sleep medicine. Thereafter, I assumed the role of assistant professor at UCLA, Olive Medical Center, where I've since been. Since that period, I've moved up to associate professor, and my practice involves primarily pulmonary critical care and sleep medicine, although I do spend some small periods of time doing general internal medicine as well. I am the fellowship program director for pulmonary critical care at our institution, as well as the associate program director for the larger multi-campus Cedars-Sinai program.
What are those two directorship positions?
These are for training programs for training doctors who've already finished their internal medicine residency to get further fellowship training or subspecialty training in the field that I belong to, which is pulmonary and critical care. I'm also a fellow of the American College of Physicians, the American College of Critical Care Medicine, College of Chest Physicians, as well as the American Academy of Sleep Medicine.
How about you have some involvement on a national or international level?
Correct. I'm part of the leadership of the American College of Chest Physicians as the vice chair of one of the committees that's responsible for really leading a lot of the programs involved on a national level with the American College of Chest Physicians. I serve as vice chair of that committee.
Okay, and can you please describe your educational background that, again, led you to these positions?
Right. So I started off my undergraduate at San Francisco State University, where I obtained a bachelor's in biology, completed graduate school, a year of graduate school at University of California, Berkeley, went on to medical school at St. George's University in Grenada, and completed my internal medicine residency at Highland General Hospital, affiliated with University of California, San Francisco. Thereafter, I came to UCLA and Cedars-Sinai program for completion of my pulmonary critical care and sleep medicine training.